Mr. Chitwala, aged 35 years, has been involved in a road traffic accident and sustained a head injury. He is admitted to your ward in unconscious state. So it is very important that we get to know the patient better and get to understand what this patient is really suffering from and what has led this patient to suffer from this same condition. So Mr. Chitwala was involved in a traffic accident, and this led to what? To him sustaining head injuries, and the patient has been admitted in unconscious state. So question A, it is saying explain the production and flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So the cerebrospinal fluid, it is produced by two main structures, which are the ependymal cells and the choroid plexuses. So these structures, they are found on the lateral ventricles, the third ventricle, and also the fourth ventricle. That's where you find these two structures. So for cerebrospinal fluid to be produced, there must be three processes which has to be involved, which are pinocytosis, diffusion, and also active transport. So these processes are the ones that facilitate the production of cerebrospinal fluid. So when the ependymal cells in the choroid plexuses produce the cerebrospinal fluid, it flows into the lateral ventricles. We know that the lateral ventricles, we have the one which is on the right and the other one which is on the left. So it flows into these lateral ventricles. From the lateral ventricles, it flows into the third ventricle through the foramen of Monro. From the third ventricle, it flows into the fourth ventricle through the aqueduct of Silvers. So these are just structures through which the cerebrospinal fluid flows through. From the fourth ventricle, the cerebrospinal fluid, it has to flow into the cisterna and also the subarachnoid spaces. So from the fourth ventricle, it flows through the structures known as the apertures of Magendie and also the aperture of Luschka into the cisterna and subarachnoid space. From these structures through the subarachnoid space, these cerebrospinal fluid, it needs to be drained into the venous circulation. So it is drained by the arachnoid villi that are found. Those are just openings in the subarachnoid space. So that is how the cerebrospinal fluid flows. Then question B, it is saying state 5 observations you would carry out on Mr. Chitwala. State 5 observations you would carry out on Mr. Chitwala. So the investigations that we need to carry out, rather the observations that we need to carry out on Mr. Chitwala are that the first one, the main important thing, it is the vital signs. So it is very important that we take all the vital signs for this patient. We need to assess for the breathing pattern. We need to assess we also need to assess for the body temperature. We need to assess for the blood pressure, and also the pulse has to be assessed. From the vital signs, we also need to assess for a level of consciousness by the use of the Glasgow Coma scale. Right? From there, we also need to assess for any discharges from the nose. It has to be assessed because this patient is likely to breathe from the nose due to the head injury. Then also we need also to observe for any otorrhea discharge. If there are any discharges that are coming out through the ears, we need to observe for that. Then from there, going to question C. So question C, it is saying identify 5 problems that Mr. Chitwala may present with during his unconscious state and use the nursing care plan to manage him. Identify 5 problems that Mr. Chitwala may present with during his unconscious state and use the nursing care plan to manage him. So that is 50 marks. So for this one, we'll just list some problems that Mr. Chitwala may present with. Then thereafter, we will research on the nursing interventions that needs to be carried out in relation to the stipulated problems. So the first problem that Mr. Chitwala may present with, it is altered breathing pattern. So Mr. Chitwala may present with altered breathing pattern. The other problem that we can include, it is self-care deficit. So Mr. Chitwala may also have difficulties in performing some activities due to what? The same unconscious state that he is in. The other problem that Mr. Chitwala may present with, it is altered nutrition, because Mr. Chitwala is unconscious, is unable to feed, so he might present with this problem. Then some of the risk problems that he may present with, we can also have a risk of pressure sore formation due to the same prolonged bedridden. Then final but not the least, can also include risk of aspiration, because this patient is unconscious, so we can have maybe aspiration pneumonia, right? Then question D, it is saying state 5 complications that may arise from head injury. State 5 complications that may arise from head injury. So some of the complications that may occur due to a head injury, we can talk of meningitis, where the meninges, the membrane that covers the brain, they get inflamed. We can also talk of encephalitis, where the brain itself get inflamed, right? Then the other problem that we can also include, we can also talk of memory loss, because head injury can also affect the memory center of the brain. Then the other one, we can also include paralysis and brain damage. So paralysis may also come in, and also brain damage may also come in.